How are you?
I'm terrific, thanks, Ben. Great to be here.
No, thank you for joining. Really good to have you on the show. We've been connected for a while, and I see a lot of the content you put out, none more so than the recent books. So keen to kind of explore a bit more about you and your background, and then hear a bit about your journey through Salesforce and obviously writing your recent books. So for our listeners, can you give me a bit of background about who you are and what you do and your career journey to date?
Absolutely. So I'll start at the very beginning. So when I left high school, I actually wanted to be an architect. Now that didn't quite work out, and I was actually kicked out of uni. I then studied some design courses, including graphic design and industrial design, but I didn't actually end up finishing them either. So, having said this, there's this good quote that I like to use, which is, "It's better to admit that you walked through the wrong door than to spend your life in the wrong room." So that's how I ended up where I am now. So at the time, I was a DJ and I ran some dance parties. Some were spectacularly successful, others were not so much. And what I wanted to do was just to understand why this was. And I stumbled upon marketing. So I went and studied marketing. I graduated. I was quite successful. I was even president of the Marketing Student Society at the uni where I was. I went straight into a job in advertising, where I started as an account executive and gradually moved up the ranks until I was a group account director. So along the way, I decided to transition from traditional advertising into digital marketing, and I haven't looked back since.
When you say architecture, you're talking like art buildings. You wanted to be like a designing buildings.
Yeah, yeah. I felt, I'm very much into carpentry and building things. So at the time, I thought architecture would be my thing. But since then, I believe that's not the career for me.
And you mentioned like that's a great quote. I've never heard that before. That's awesome. I'm going to use that again in the future.
Excellent.
But you said you stumbled across marketing because you were looking to understand what went wrong, and like what do you mean by that? How did you stumble across marketing?
Yeah. So the first dance party that we ran was huge. We had a hall of about the capacity of about 600 people, and we ended up having about 800 people turn up. Right, it was massive. And then the next one, I decided to go to a different location, get a bigger hall, 1,000 people, and there was only about 200 people. And I was like, "What's going on?" And a friend of mine who was studying business, he had a marketing textbook, and I grabbed his textbook and I kind of skimmed through it and went, "Wow, this is all the stuff that I missed out on." So that's how I got into marketing.
Yeah, nice. And just to wind back a little bit, you're in advertising. Was that in like the good old days of advertising? Everything you see on TV was true. I'm talking like Mad Men kind of stories.
well, well, I'm not that old, but
No, I don't mean working back in that time, but back when yeah, things were a bit interesting in the world of advertising.
yeah, 100%. This was before digital, when TV, radio, print was king. And it was a very interesting time because I worked with old school creatives, and they were from the Mad Men era.
Yeah,
And that was funny because we were banned from having meetings after 12 o'clock on Friday because they went to pub at 12 o'clock and they came back at 4 o'clock. And then beer o'clock started then. So, yeah, it was an interesting time, very different from now.
yeah. Wow. So you then pursued marketing, fell upon it, and then you said you moved into digital marketing. At what point was that? What was the digital marketing landscape then?
It was around about 2004 for me. So I was working in advertising, healthcare advertising to be specific, and there was a growing need for marketing, like landing pages and websites and things like that. And basically, I saw the light and thought, this is where I need to be because this it's a growing thing. Back then, it was like 2% spend, but I knew that was all going to change. So I consciously made the move across into digital marketing.
From a technology standpoint, was this before you were like there were? I'm guessing obviously before things like Salesforce Marketing Cloud, Exact Target, and stuff. But what were the sophisticated technology platforms at that stage? Or
Good question. So Exact Target existed back then, absolutely. But I didn't get onto ExactTarget until 2008. So back then, the digital marketing was pretty much websites and digital advertising in terms of banner ads and stuff like that. I wouldn't say it was very sophisticated back then. I would call it the Wild West back then. Things were still kind of being made up. I remember there was a website which really impressed me because the whole landing page were keywords, right? Because back in the day, the search engines picked up on keywords and it was just all keywords and they kind of turned it into creative and kind of made fun of it. It was part of their brand. But yeah, it was the Wild West of the web.
Yeah, yeah. That sounds like people's CVs sometimes, just like a load of keywords, just trying to get picked up by ATS systems, trying to game the
Yeah, that's
system.
it.
So your book is all around customer satisfaction, ultimately having happy customers and
Yes.
understanding, I guess, putting yourself in the customer's shoes and understanding what their expectations are and things like that. So
Yeah.
now, especially in Salesforce consulting, there's a very clear way of assessing how you've performed for a company. You've got CSAT scores. When did customer satisfaction become something that was not important, because I guess it's always important, but something you really thought about? And historically, how would you measure that before there were things like CSAT scores?
So to answer your first question, when was it important for me? I figured out very early on. It's all about the customer. So back in the DJ days, I ran my own mobile disco business. So I had to find, acquire, and keep customers. So I had to do a great job every time, impress my customers, deliver satisfaction, because I relied really heavily on word of mouth. One of the philosophies I lived on back then was you're only as good as your last gig. So back then I was young, I didn't know what I was doing, but I did know that one thing, that you be good to the customer and they'll be good to you. Your second question about CSAT scores. So I think CSAT scores is a big indicator, but even without the CSAT scores, you should know how you're going. There's other soft measures of signs of satisfaction. Definitely, customers are loyal, which means they are less likely to look for alternatives, which mean they're less likely to compare you to others and force you to price match, the race to the bottom,
Mm-hmm.
because they respect your service that you provide and the value that you provide. Other things is how they treat you as a partner and a trusted advisor instead of just another service provider. So there's the benefits that go with this. Overall, the relationship's much better. It just means that working together is more pleasant. So there's lots of signs beyond the CSAT score that a customer is satisfied.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I agree on that. Especially like in a market like we've been through recently, like that price element. It's when you've built trust and an ongoing strong relationship with the customer, it definitely isn't always about price, you know. And I think that's been a challenge for a lot of people that are trying to acquire new companies, new customers, because obviously the easiest way in a lot of people's minds is just drop prices, but not always the most effective, especially for long-term relationships.
Hmm.
What one question I have, which I think is important for especially Salesforce consultants, but and obviously I know your domain expertise is in the marketing cloud space or digital marketing space, but this goes for anyone across the Salesforce landscape. I think that there's a perception, obviously, that people would understand what their customers want when because it's a project, it's delivered to deliver X, Y, Z. But how do you truly understand what a customer wants and how you can not just deliver on that, but really wow them?
The simple advice is you just need to listen and understand. Communication, a lot of people think they communicate, but what's happening is they're not listening. They're talking and they're not listening. You just need to get that understanding from the customer. What you need to avoid is assuming that you understand, also assuming that the customer understands you. So you have to be absolutely crystal clear with the way you communicate. So when there is the communication, remember it's a two-way street, right? So you need to validate your understanding. So the customer goes, yes, that's actually what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you're asking questions. With the listening, um, make sure you're not listening for what you want to hear, because sometimes you've got this preconceived idea, right? And you're just listening for that rather than opening your mind and listening to actually what the customer is saying.
And I think also it's not just a tick box exercise, right? Like it's not because I think everyone will follow a certain process. Like with the new customer client project kickoff, it's like you've got certain things you need to understand, but it's like
Yep.
it's not just ticking that box and being able to fill in, right, what does the customer want. It's like, because there's that question that I think a lot of people ask is like, what does success look like to you?
Yep.
But like I think if you took every customer's first answer for that, you probably wouldn't get to the actual the bottom of what success looks like. You'd probably get like a high level answer that doesn't
Yep.
actually enable you to wow them or to really know if you've met that.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, it's a good question, right? But it's a stepping stone question because you need to understand the why. So often, you need to peel back the layers and get deep down and to really understand what's important for the customer and why it's important for the customer. Once you understand that, the way you look at the problem, the way you solve the problem is going to be very different from if you just took it at face value.
Hmm. Do you think you can always avoid conflict with the customer? Do you think that it's possible in always to always never end up in a situation where there's conflict, or are there times you just can't avoid that it's going to happen?
That's a really good question. I think the simple answer is there are ways to avoid conflict at a high level, but I think there are some personalities that make it challenging to avoid conflict. So I'd
Hmm.
say 9 times out of 10, you can practice things, do things, use your skills to avoid conflict. But sometimes things just might blow up, and it might be quite challenging and conflicts arise. And I think the conflicts also depend on other factors such as how the project's going. If the project's going well, everyone's turning a blind eye and they're happy with it. But if things are going not so well, that's where you really need to step up with your communication skills, your understanding skills to try and avoid that conflict.
Do you think any, like, I guess it depends on the level of conflict, right? But do you think an unhappy customer can be turned into a 5-star CSAT score?
The simple answer is yes. But there's a big but. And the reason why there's a big but is I think you need to break it down in two parts, right? So, part one is what you do for them to be unhappy, right? So, you need to understand what you're doing that's making them unhappy. You need to fix that and do things which will make them happy. The other part is the customer. So there's this interesting stat, which is if you've created a bad impression, to actually turn that round to a good impression takes 8 positive interactions for it to actually turn around. So not only do you have to know how to fix it, you actually need to consistently deliver on that to move that dial back to positive. So yes, it can be done, but you need to spend a lot of energy to understand and follow through repeatedly to get you back up to the five out of five CSAT state.
Well, that's really interesting because I think a lot of people would just tackle that one problem, right, and think, right now I'm back to zero. I might have been at -1, now I'm back to zero because I've solved that problem, and then
Yep.
they just continue to work the way that they're working in the first instance because they're like, right, that's been solved. But actually knowing that stat and like you're proactively going out of your way now, not just to be good, but to be great because you want to make those 8 impressions and turn things around.
Yep.
That's the only way you do it, right? But you have to know that. You have to know that that's important.
Yeah. And that's the tricky part, right? Because it's people have long memories. So if let's say you do something bad and then you do something good, the customer's like, oh, is it 50-50? Are they going to give me a bad experience next time?
Yeah.
Right. So hence the repeated good, 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 good to a point where they're like, I'm actually expecting another good experience. So that's why you have to do that repeated investment.
So, what do you consistently see from good consultants, like not just consultants, but like good people within the consulting world that continually impress customers? Like, what are they doing that maybe other people aren't doing, and are they skills or competencies that can be taught?
Let me answer this in two ways, right? So the first way is yes, I think there's a heap of key skills, and yes, they can be taught. So I'll go through the skills that I think are super important. I think first is empathy. So you need to understand the customer, You need to put yourself in their shoes. You need to see things from their point of view, right? Number two is that you need to care. You need to want to look after the customer, do the best for them, and they need to understand that you care. So that's number two. Number three, communication. We've spoken about that before. You need to be able to clearly communicate with the customer. You need to be able to listen, which leads to understanding, which means you can do the right things for them instead of assuming things and hoping for happy accidents. The next one is capability. So you must know your stuff, right? And you have to be good at what you do. So absolutely, you need to get your certifications. You need to sharpen your axe to be able to do those amazing things. And I think lastly is you need to have confidence, right? You have to have the confidence to be able to push yourself, to be able to lead the customer, take them from here to there, right? So if you're confident, they'll have the confidence in you and they'll be more likely to follow you and accept your leadership. The part two of answering the question is so how do you put this all into practice, right? So I've got this framework. I call it the golden triangle for customer success, right? So there's three sides to it. So one is to be good to work with, so be likable. Number two is to be able to deliver, be good at doing your work. And number three is doing things on time, right? So being good with your promises. I've used this with everything I do. And what I've noticed is like, you can get away with just two of these sides. And the customer will be like, okay, no worries. If you only do one, you'll get replaced very quickly. But if you can do all three, right, that's when you deliver satisfaction. That's when customers really, really enjoy working with you and continue to work with you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'd say. Those are the skills: empathy, care, communication, capability, and confidence, and using that golden triangle framework.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. Well, one thing I've seen in some interactions between like when I've been involved in I've sat in on certain project kickoff and things like that with some of my customers, and I've been involved in a few things where you've got like a consulting partner that is scoping something out, but they don't necessarily have the domain expertise of that part of the customer. Now, I know in an ideal world you would, right? You'd have someone like the BA would have both Salesforce and business knowledge in that domain, but that's not always going to be possible. And I can sense that the customer gets frustrated because there's these questions being asked that are super obvious to them, but it's like the consultant has to ask them because they don't know, right? It's not their business. They don't know how these things are done, and it's kind of like the business think they're like teaching the consulting partner how to suck eggs, but it's like a really important thing that if overlooked is going to be a real hole in the solution. But
Yep.
and there's this like frustration of having to answer these questions that seem obvious. Like
Yep.
how do you manage that kind of, because that's not conflict, that's just like a bit of abrasion, right? It's like,
Yep.
this is obvious. Why are you asking me these questions? Like, how long is this going to take? Like, how long
Yep.
am I going to be sat in this room answering these questions? I've got a job to do. But how do you manage that frustration?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think everyone will find themselves in that situation in one point in time or another. So I think what you must do is you just need to be open and honest, check your ego in the door,
Mm-hmm.
and actually be upfront and say, hey, I'm here, you're there. I want to be here. So I'm going to have to ask you certain things, which might seem a bit obvious, but they're not obvious to me. But what this does is help me understand. And once I'm up here, I'll be able to do all those amazing things for you. So it's that expectation setting. If you kind of go in there and you bluff and you pretend to know everything, and the customer's like, this doesn't match, right? You say you know everything, or you project you know everything, but you're asking this level questions, it's not going to work. But if you're open and honest and upfront and go, I have this gap in understanding your particular domain. If you bring me up to here, I'll be able to add value with my domain knowledge to take you to that next level. So yeah, it's about setting expectations and just making sure that you're clear with the customer. So if they know where you're coming from, then it just makes everything so much smoother.
And I guess that's probably something to do even before you've started asking the questions, right? It's like setting the scene before that frustration
Yes.
even starts to build up.
Yep, 100%. So I mean, if we jump into like project land, we would always have a kickoff meeting before the actual project, right? Sometimes we'd actually have a pre kickoff meeting before the kickoff meeting. So it's just about using these opportunities to make sure you are aligned with the customer, right? Make sure you understand them, they understand you. You're in it for the long haul or duration of the project. It's better that they know what's happening up front and prepares them. It just removes that pain and frustration, because instead of scratching their heads going, what's going on? They know what's going on. So they can put things in place to deal with it.
Hmm.
Same with you, right? Because if you've understood their stuff, you can actually do the things that you need to do to make it happen.
In terms of like some of the worst things that a consultant can do in terms of communicating with their business, is it just not doing the three sides of the golden triangle at all? Is it like not communicating timescales, not meeting promises? Is that ultimately what it comes back to?
I think all those things are important for delivering a good project, but I think that the biggest mistake is not understanding. And the reason I say that is because as a consultant, you've kind of only got two jobs, right? One is to understand the customer, right? And that happens via communication. The other is to deliver. So everything kind of boils down to this. So if you're not understanding the customer, which means you're not communicating properly, that's the biggest mistake. It all goes back to communication. It's so important that if you don't do it, lots of things can go wrong. When the communication's wrong, the understanding is wrong. And when the understanding is wrong, the delivery is wrong, and then you're in the poo. So it's
Hmm.
as simple as that. You just need to understand what the customer really needs, and it's communication.
Obviously, as your career has evolved, you're now obviously a senior member of the practice you're in. So you're going to be on engagements with more junior people. As a leader now, do you find it difficult not to jump in during some of these discussions? Like, do you feel it's important for people to make their own mistakes in communicating and to learn
Yep.
from those mistakes, or are you there to step in at the time when you're seeing that mistake unfold?
That's a really good question, Ben. So I try not to step in. So what I try and do is set my team up for success. So I do this in a few different ways. So firstly, I let them know what my expectations are. So I say, hey, I need you to do this. I expect you to do this. So it's super clear for them as to what they need to do. Now, even if I'm in the meeting, what I'll do is I'll observe. I will gently nudge if the conversations are going the wrong way. I won't jump in as such. But then what happens is I'll always do a retro with the team and pull apart what happened, what went well, what didn't go so well, what they need to do the next time, so they can learn. Because I'm not always going to be there, right? So as I get busier, I'm not going to be on projects. As my team grows, I'm not going to be on projects.
Hmm.
It's super important for me to instill these skills and behaviors in the team. And I need to do it in an environment that's nurturing and setting them up for success. So, yeah, I need to let them fail, but fail in a safe way. And then go, okay, please have a think about what you did. How can you improve next time? Actually, here's some tips on how you can improve, etc. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Yeah. I like that. So, if you go like if you think about being on a project yourself, I said it's not just about being scripted earlier; it's about kind of like not just ticking boxes. But do you have some like I guess killer questions that you would always ask a customer? And I know different situations, different customers, different projects, but are there things you always want to know from a customer?
It's always the why. Because every project's different, I don't have set questions where I list out and go bang, 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 bang. I always ask, why is it important to you? What does this mean if this gets delivered? What does this mean if it doesn't? And understand the why. And if you ask why enough times, it gets you down to the real reason. So I think my super secret weapon is why. It's as simple as that. And it's actually a good question. So why do you think that? Or why is this important? Yeah.
It's funny because I'm not sure if you've seen my LinkedIn. We're recording this. I think it's Thursday. This morning I put up a LinkedIn post saying like if you're looking for your first Salesforce professional, yes, look for them to be able to build stuff in Salesforce, obviously be hands on, but it's equally or even more important that they have the confidence and I guess the curiosity to ask why, because otherwise you end up in a situation where, and I see this again and again, especially like talking well both Marketing Cloud and core Salesforce. It's like someone's come in and they've built loads of stuff, but they've built everything the business asked for, and then the company spends years trying to unpick all of that work and strip out a lot of the fields, the automation, that they didn't really ever need, or one person felt they
Mm.
needed, and
Yep.
the person in the hot seat just didn't push back and ask, why are we actually doing this? Like, what is it going to achieve? What's the reason you need this?
Yes, unfortunately, I see it as well. On customers that we acquire, not the customers that we have. And you're absolutely right, Ben. It's people who just take orders from the customer and go, "Yep, I'll go build it for you." And they're super busy. They build it, and it's amazing, but it's just kind of piles of stuff which isn't needed.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's absolutely. I mean, that's why we are consultants, or that's why customers get us as consultants. We're the experts in the field. We don't ask them to do what they do for us. You don't go to a doctor and go, "Can you operate like this for me?" It's like, that's no good. You have to just
Yeah.
trust the expert. So as a consultant, we need to step up as the expert. We need to be the leader. We need to go, "Hey, client, just stop right there, because what you're asking for is actually going to hurt you in the long term. Have you
Mm-hmm.
considered it this way?" So that's the art in saying no without saying no. You just need to be able to guide the customer, give them options, and take them to the place where they need to be.
Yeah, love that. So we're in an industry, or we're aligned to a technology. You, Marketing Cloud, and me being a recruiter in the Salesforce world, where like continual learning is really encouraged, and
Yep,
certifications are massive, right? People are
yep.
constantly getting certified, learning new products. But what I don't necessarily see all the time is people expanding their consulting skill set outside of the Salesforce technology. So people are always getting certifications, they're always staying on top of what Salesforce are. But how does someone continue to develop as a consultant and not just a Salesforce professional? So like the soft skills, the questioning, things like that. How do you advise your team? How do you see people doing that well?
That's a really good question. And it's interesting because when you say like investing yourself in consulting skills by training, absolutely that's one facet, but they're actually not the consulting skills. The consulting skills are your ability to ask the questions, to understand their problem state, understand how to solve that problem. And that's when the platform technology knowledge comes in, because the solution looks like this and you use this technology. So the consulting skills are actually kind of sit above the technology. It revolves around the customer. Once again, it's all back to the customer. They'll have a problem that you need to unpack and understand. So yeah, so with my team, I essentially ask them to put yourself in the customer's shoes, understand the customer, understand what their problems are thoroughly. In order to do that, they need to have those skills, which are all those soft skills, being able to communicate, being able to listen, all those types of things, and then actually practice those. So for my team, and that's why the book came to be, my team, I was seeing the same things over and over again. And I decided to put it down on paper, so to speak, and make a list of it. And then I've refined it and turned it into a book. And it's actually been really useful because I still use it as a guide almost, because I'll be talking to the team in a little retro and they'll say this and this, and I'll actually refer to a chapter that I wrote. I don't quote it like scripture, but I actually go, "Oh, this is the scenario and this is what you should be doing." So yeah, invest in yourself, find out other ways to deliver value to customers by understanding them. I've got a book which is all focused about this. So I think it's worth checking out. The title's really long, but it's descriptive of what it does. It's called 5-Star Consulting, 12 Principles for Technical Consultants on How to Deliver Outstanding Customer Satisfaction. Those soft skills are something that you need to polish up on. these 12 principles identify what the customer needs so you can understand the customer. And it also contains practical tips on what you need to do. So yeah, that's absolutely one way you can springboard into getting better with working with customers.
Awesome. And I know you also create content yourself. Where can people find you to either view or listen to that content, or to reach out and ask you any questions?
I have a YouTube channel, Key to Success. So my name, KEI to success.au. I've got a website, Key to Success. So I produce this type of content and put it up there. So yeah, please check it out. Give it a like, leave a comment. It'd be amazing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed that chat. And yeah, I think there's a lot of value in there for people in this consulting world. Or, it doesn't have to be a consultant, can be someone that's looking after internal customers as well. Basically, anyone that's looking to wow and truly understand their customer, whether that's internal or external.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ben. It's been amazing experience talking with you, and thank you for the opportunity.
My pleasure.